Introduce you to my guests on the programme first of all. We have Chris Butler, MP, who is with us. We have Richard Stevenson, who's in the centre there. And we have, it's a real name, folks, yes, Dr. Douglas Diggle, who is on the end. And we're going to debate now whether or not drugs should be legalised. I did ask somebody to come from the Home Office. They were very busy tonight, actually, but they did send me a statement. And you, so that's very nice.
Send me.
Didn't they send you? But you agreed to come. That's right. I was going to put the statement here on the chair, but I've decided against that. In fact, I think we should start off, Chris. I've got the government's feeling on this, and it's sort of non-committal, really. It says there's no such thing as harmless experiments with drugs, no such things as recreational drug taking, and certainly no case for legalising prohibited drugs. Drug misuse sooner or later leads to addiction, poverty, crime, illness, and possibly death, which I think most people would agree with. And they go on to say that they need support from family and friends, from their schools, and where they work. And we are starting a major new initiative to help that happen. And we also want to hear about methods used by other countries and any other suggestions anybody has, which seems that they've got a very open mind about it. What about yourself?
Well, I've gone into the question in some detail. I'm Secretary of the All-Party Drugs Misuse Committee, so I didn't know much about it before I got into it, and it is a fascinating subject. It gets more interesting the more you look at it. But in the United States, they've got a massive problem there, something like 12 million cocaine users.
But they're beginning to realise that the police can't really solve the problem, are they?
Well, they couldn't put 12 million people in jail.
Precisely.
And the policy of complete prohibition isn't reducing drug use in the United States. Last year we had worldwide record crops of cocaine and opium.
So the idea of spraying the foliage of this and getting rid of these sort of crops like that, you don't go along with that?
Well, it seems to spend an awful lot of money just diverting the crop to elsewhere. They tried that in Mexico. They destroyed the marijuana crop in Mexico, and now it's all grown in the United States.
So would you like to see it decriminalised?
No, I don't think that's the answer either. I think that gives the wrong message to people, because I'm looking not only for pushing people into the official services by keeping it illegal generally.
But do you think there's any point in sort of locking up some people who we may have in the audience here who've been smoking dope or taking heroin or something like that? Do you think there's any point in locking them up or not?
Well, in large parts of the country, in Merseyside, for instance, if they were just small cannabis users, they'd probably only get a warning as the law stands at the moment. But we couldn't put all our drug misusers in prison in this country. OK, let me go on to Richard Stevenson, who's sitting next to you. Now, Richard, you're an economist, right? So you're looking at this in a slightly different context, aren't you? The fact that you've actually said you think, forget all the niceties about drugs, actually decriminalising them, you think they should be made just totally legal?
Yes, I do, as a matter of fact. Like everybody else here, I want to do something about drug problems. Present policies simply don't seem to be working. I don't think there's the slightest chance that they will work in the foreseeable future at the levels of expenditure which governments are prepared to give us, and therefore, I mean, I think we should legalise them.
If it was legalised, I could go into any shop. You're suggesting you get it in a shop. What sort of shop?
Yes, we could talk about different things, but I'd suggest that it be about as illegal as, say, alcohol. Yeah. Licensed premises.
But then wouldn't that encourage people who hadn't tried drugs to go in and
I think it would. I mean, that's a danger. As a matter of fact, I do not believe, actually, that whether the stuff is legal or illegal or dear or cheap actually has a lot of influence on a person's decision to become a drug user.
What do you think makes somebody want to take drugs?
Yeah, I think if we knew that, we'd be well towards solving the problem. I don't think we know.
I think they probably like the sensation.
You think the fact that it's illegal is one of the draws towards it?
Well, it may be. That may be, but they actually like the sensation of the drug. I don't think there's much fun going into that.
OK, now Douglas Diggle is a doctor. Dougie, you've actually presumably had people come to you with drug problems and related problems. You don't think it should be legalised or decriminalised either?
Well, certainly I don't think... I think the idea of making it sort of freely accessible is going to take it into the category of getting us into what you mentioned earlier in the programme of alcohol and cigarettes. We've got 100,000 deaths a year through alcohol abuse and 1,000, 1,500 deaths on the road due to alcohol problems. So if you're going to do that, you're going to multiply the problem in that sector as well, and I think it's a bad policy. OK, now most of the audience have presumably you've got some involvement in drugs one way or the other, haven't you? And there's a guy on the end here. Can we actually get over here and talk to my friend here? Perhaps if you come over here and stand in the light. Now you're a registered drug addict.
I'm a registered heroin
right? Turn around this way. Yes. Yeah.
Registered heroin addict.
How long have you been on heroin?
14.
14 years.
Yeah.
Would you like to get off it if you could? Or do you enjoy it?
I enjoy it. I take it. I take it because I enjoyed it. But if I could carry on now the way I am now, which is I've got it in a decriminalised way. I get it prescribed through seeing a doctor at a clinic. I mean, I'd like to see most category A drugs decriminalised to the extent where you would have to go to a clinic and have them prescribed daily by a doctor.
But if you could have your life over again, would you rather not have got involved in it?
No, I don't regret it for a minute.
You don't regret it?
No.
Yeah? But you wouldn't want to encourage other people to go on it? I don't want you to encourage other people to go on it at all. I haven't got a moralistic stance on that. Okay, go back and join the audience for a few moments. Let me now introduce to you a piece of film. We went along to Merseyside, who have a completely different outlook on the drug problem at the moment, and see what you think of this. Okay, welcome back. Now, just before we get into talking to my guests and some more of the audience who are looking stunned here, in my greatness probably, Richard, who's on the end here. Now, Richard has, shut up. Richard has actually come off drugs, but you started drugs at an early age, didn't you? How old were you?
16.
16. Yeah. Now, you were giving the poor old doctor here a bit of a hard time in the break after that film. Why was that?
Because he was saying that drugs are a disease, and I was saying, well, like, if it's a disease if people use it, but to people that don't use it, then it isn't a disease. And the fact is that he can say that people can be reducted off methadone, and I believe in that. But at the same time, I was saying, well, what about women that you've probably prescribed things like Valium to for the last 20 years, and are you bringing them off, or are you still making them have a habit? You know?
Yeah. Did you think what was happening on Merseyside there was good?
Well, you're always going to find it's like the smoking or the Valium idea. There are going to be a small, well, not smoking, sorry, the Valium. Let's talk about the Valium idea. There are a number of people who are now addicted to it. They reckon about 250,000 people in this country are addicted to Valium. A large percentage of those you can actually get off it, but there are a small number who cannot be gotten off it, and that's very tragic.
So should you be prescribing them a limited amount to keep them
it's the only way to do
stable?
it. Yes, that's the only thing you can do. So people here, for instance, maybe they are one of the small percentage who do actually genuinely need a long-term maintenance dose, but one really ought not to be looking at that as the norm. You should be looking at clinics like this as a means of getting rid of it eventually, whatever the time course is, and not encouraging people to suppose that they can glibly go and get it and then have a lifetime support.
Now, Richard, let me go back to you. You don't think it should be legally available, do you?
No.
You've seen the problem. I mean, your own story is one that you've had nothing but problems. You've been in prison a number of times, haven't you?
Yeah.
How many times have you been in prison?
5 altogether.
5 times altogether. And you're how old now?
22.
23. Well, we must make the point that Richard is off it, and Richard is a darn good advertisement for getting off it, right?
Yeah.
Because there's some people I detect in the audience here tonight who are quite proud of the fact that they smoke dope, and you know, it's cool, and hey man, look, there's nothing wrong with us. You should see yourselves and where I'm standing. But you would say that leads on to other things.
I would say that I don't see the point in you're talking about decriminalising drugs. Well, drugs that are prescribed by a doctor, as far as like getting reducted off heroin or whatever, decriminalised anyway because it's legal. And I think to legalise drugs, I mean, it depends on what context you're talking about.
Let me just go for a moment to Chris Butler, who is the MP here, and who hopefully at some stage or another will have some something to do with perhaps helping to stamp out the problems of drug abuse. Now, you're aware of what happens on Merseyside. Do you think it's something you would like to see extended to other parts of the country?
Yes, because at the moment you get people coming from other parts of the country into Merseyside to find that kind of availability. Now, that tends to work with heroin addicts and people on opiates. It tends to work with them. But I'm not so sure it will work with cocaine and other drugs. Certainly wouldn't work with crack.
How do you feel as an MP, I've taken that, how do you feel as an MP, though, about the problems, the misuse of drug problems if you're talking about the drug of alcohol or tobacco at the moment? Do you think that the government maybe should do something more to curb that?
Well, there's 2 pre-existing problems, and I don't want to add a 3rd or a 4th to it. The government is gradually clamping down on tobacco and that kind of advertising.
But it won't come out of its sort of bunker, if you like, and say, tobacco will damage your health, it still says it may, doesn't it?
I think it actually does say it will.
It
now.
will. It does say will now, does it? Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, in fact, there are far more complex issues here, aren't there? The old argument, of course, of revenue, which is enormous, and the powers that wield in favour of the cigarettes. In fact, it's foolish to smoke 1 cigarette a day. You know, it really is foolish. And it's so known a fact now that it should be public knowledge and made very forcefully.
Okay. The doctor that they were talking about on Merseyside also spent some time with me, and this is what he had to say. But are moving towards that now. And even the police themselves have actually said that they think what's happening on Merseyside is helping to some extent.
Well, let's make it quite plain, the government's not going to legalise drugs. But I think you need to keep it illegal to force people into the services in the middle, where they can get their controlled available drugs under proper circumstances.
Well,
Douglas, just one moment, Peter, I'll come back to you, but Douglas, yes.
Yeah, the comment that Peter just made now is quite reasonable. Yes, there is such a thing as recreational drug use. It does actually exist, but...
Like drinking in the pub in the evening and smoking cigarettes.
Sure,
yeah.
but the higher, and it's already been shown, that the higher the number of users of whatever drug you choose, then the higher the percentage of those who will become addicted and have problems. So that if you make it widely available, you're going to get more people. So you're going to get clinics filled up with these people. That's what will happen.
Peter?
Well, I think we must take a realistic approach to the situation and say that there are these young folk who are going to experiment with drugs. There's nothing we're going to do to dissuade them, so how can we ensure that they do it as safely as possible? And the way to do that is through counselling, education and information.
Okay,
now,
Peter, thank you. That's a good point. We're going to have to leave you there. I'd like now to talk to Dr. Daffyd Allen-Jones, who is aware of what happens on Merseyside, but you take a completely different view, don't you, Doctor?
Yes, well, of course, I am in a completely different area. I'm in an area of about 500,000 people living in North Wales, bordering on areas of England where drugs are.
So how do you treat addicts yourself? What are your feelings for?
Well, I've seen periods of drug usage come and go over about 20 years. I've seen earlier periods when there was
but what do you do yourself?
Oh, I offer detoxification. I'll offer to take anybody in, take them off any drugs they're using, and then try to give them as much support as one can to keep them off.
So what do you think John Marks is doing?
Well, I prefer to say what I'm doing. You know, if
I want to know what you think John Marks is doing.
I can't agree.
Well, you can't. In fact, would it be fair to say that you think he's being very irresponsible?
Oh no, I think he's. I know John very well. We know each other, but we absolutely disagree. I know, for instance, now that ampules of injectable opiates are available on the street in North Wales with the batch numbers rubbed off.
But so you're saying that they may get them from someone like...
I think there is a leakage. There's no question. You can buy methadone on the street. Now, if we collude in developing, if you like, a subculture or an endemic situation where young people are easily going to get these things on a permanent basis...
Okay, let me just, before you go any further, come over to Richard Stevenson, who is here. Now, Richard wants drugs to be made freely available. All drugs, right?
Yes, absolutely.
But I mean, don't you see what the doctor here is saying is that if they are freely available, then some people are going to abuse this, and
they are. Yeah, absolutely. And what you would have to say, I mean, it's entirely possible that therefore the amount of drug use would go up, but it does not follow that the amount of problem drug use would rise. And furthermore, if it did, my contention is that you could deal with these problems much better when the problem's out in the open, it's legal, and users are amenable to advice.
Okay, Richard, who has been an addict. Yes, Richard.
So what you're actually saying there is if people, it's okay for people to take drugs in the end, like because they are legalised, they get into such a mess because they're taking heavier and heavier addiction. That what we're not actually talking about is the people that are involved within it, or we're talking about the crime involved in that. I mean, which way does it go?
We're never going to encourage people. In fact, all legalisers believe that we would intensify education programmes and that sort of thing. But let me just put one point which I think is not been raised before, very quickly. Legalisation, I put it to you, is the best and possibly the only way of getting criminals out of drugs, and that I think is almost the most important point.
Okay, one last point to the doctor before we must take a break.
Well, would you freely make available amphetamines, for instance, when we know that amphetamines can make people really psychotic? Would you legalise LSD? Would you legalise acid, which we know some people want? Would you legalise everything, or would you pick and choose what you imagine at one time is least harmful? If you allow people to have whatever drugs, whatever things that affect their mind and their feelings, where do you stop?
Doctor, thank you very much indeed. We'll come back and answer some more of those questions after the break. Okay, we've had scores of letters on this particular subject, as you would guess, and a chap called Robin from London SW2 says, tougher laws whereby convicted dope dealers, peddlers and couriers alike all get automatic life sentences with no parole, and if you have any of these pro-legalisers on the show, knee them where it hurts and throw them out. Okay, we won't actually do that to you, Richard. You think that perhaps you're being misunderstood, don't you?
I don't think I'm being misunderstood, but the point I'd like to make following the last telephone call is that just because we disapprove of something doesn't mean it should be prohibited. Many people disapprove of alcohol. Would anyone seriously suggest prohibiting alcohol? They would not. America did it, and my goodness, what a disaster it was. And so is drugs. Drugs is a disaster too.
But then the business is very much more complex than that because it provides revenue. There's a lot of money involved and other issues involved as well. It's socially acceptable to get drunk, as it were. You see what I mean? So
I mean, there are a number of people here, presumably most of you here in the audience, you use some kind of drugs, right? I mean, does anybody want to start off and tell me what sort of drugs they use? Or are you keeping that a secret? What about you? Well, you're looking at me. I thought I'd start with you.
He'll tell you.
Okay, well, Tiny Tim's godson over here. What about you? You were holding up a book before telling me all about cannabis. You use cannabis?
I'll say that there are a lot of people here that have experimented with all kinds of drugs. I think we all agree. It's political. About cannabis. I think there's a lot of people here agree that hard drugs, you can't really justify them. But
would you actually like not to smoke anything? I mean,
I like not to smoke.
It's better than getting pissed.
It is. You think it is?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Doesn't give you a beer belly. Doesn't give you a beer belly.
Yeah.
There's a big difference. There's a very big difference between soft drugs and hard drugs.
Of course there is, but do you think one leads on to another?
No.
You don't feel one leads on to another?
Well, maybe.
Just a minute.
Yes, I don't think it's necessarily that. The trouble comes is that in the illegal market, and I'm arguing against myself here, that in the illegal market that there is always this element of the quiet push and then introducing something harder when they're pushing the softer stuff, and that's how it manipulates.
Plenty of people here.
So, I mean, cannabis is not that bad. It's no worse than smoking a cigarette, to my
What about
mind,
my friend in the back with the hat?
I was just saying about that point of leading on, from softer stuff to harder stuff, that you're missing the point slightly in that, like, you would never find a dealer that did the two together. You know, you find the people who smoke soft drugs stick together and the dealers sort of smoke off their friends and that, but you don't know junkies or people like that. So I don't think it would lead on to that, you know.
But you drink presumably as well as everything else?
Oh, yeah. But I mean, it's a difference between me, say, being like, drinking socially and someone, the difference between someone drinking socially and being an alcoholic.
Okay, well, let's take another angle. We've got Douglas on the phone, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Douglas. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Now, Douglas, you've had some drug-related problems in your life, haven't you? Tell me fairly briefly about them.
Well, my son's a heroin addict, but the good news is he's been clean for 5 years.
Yep.
I think this whole question of legalisation is something of a red herring. And I thought that figure of £5 million a day, which came out, was very interesting because I'm wondering whether the chemical companies who have made so much money out of making women and others addicted to tranquilizers are behind this, because it really has got nothing to do with it. What we need is more emphasis upon recovery. You see, I'm involved in an organisation called Families Anonymous,
But don't you think what John Marks on Merseyside was doing is helping people to recover, or at least not to be drawn into the web, if you like, that drugs can lead you into?
Well, let me put it this way, James. In Families Anonymous, for 5 years, I've been involved in a self-help group where families of people who are addicted meet with each other and help each other.
Yeah.
My heart sinks when a parent says, my son or my daughter's got a script, because which is a legalized prescription.
But isn't it...
what happens? Let me just finish. What you see is they go downhill from there on. Now, I can only speak of my own experience. I don't say that the people on Merseyside aren't doing the opposite, but methadone is more addictive than heroin. Heroin is comparatively easy to get off.
So
it's much easier than alcohol.
Douglas, though, before you can get off it, you need to be taken down, don't you? You think it would be better then for, I don't know how your son was got off heroin, but it's better for him to be given registered doses of heroin rather than methadone, you're saying?
He had methadone for a week.
And then he was off?
And then he was off, yeah.
Great, I'm glad to hear it.
The important thing is counselling. What we haven't heard about is something has to be given.
At the end of the show, Douglas, we're going to be putting up some phone numbers, and for people who would like to get in touch with various organisations, the phone numbers will come up later on in the programme. Let's take a few calls now from people who've been phoning in, and we haven't had time to get to many calls on the programme tonight, which is unfortunate. Dave from Essex, not David Essex. Dave from Essex, hello.
Hello?
Yes, Dave.
Yeah, where I live, James, there's a lot of drugs really broken out a lot, yeah. And on the subject about like legalising all drugs, I mean, for a start, I reckon you can't really do it in an hour.
Fine, thanks, Dave. John from North Wales. Hello, John.
Hi, James.
Yes, John.
Hi. I'd like to ask one of the guests you've got there.
Speak up a bit, John.
Hi, James.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask one of the guests you've got there this evening about people smoking dope in the pubs, yeah?
What about it?
Well, the thing is, it's just like smoking a cigarette when they...
Okay. It's you know, cigarettes can kill you. I mean, it's a stupid thing to say, really, isn't it? Right. Steve from Bristol. Hello, Steve.
Hello.
Yeah.
I've been in the Air Force for 4.5 years, and I've seen some of the drugs abused in the way that they're actually laid onto kids under the age of 10 with badges that, you know, that smell nice and taste nice.
Yeah.
And then the next time they come back, when the badges stop smelling nice and tasting nice, they cost them 10p.
Yeah.
And eventually these kids get onto the harder ones and more money. Is this justifiable? Do you think kids should be put under these sort of pressures? And to do this, you're now legalising it. And to legalise that sort of thing is totally outrageous.
No, but the point is not so much legalising it, I think. Thank you for your call. Not so much legalising it, that we're saying decriminalise it, so that the people involved in drug pushers, the people in the drug underground, if you like, the gangsters in there who are using human beings and putting them through torture are done away with. And the one way to do that seems not to use the police all the time, and come back to Chris over here for a few moments, but to actually make it less of a criminal offence and help the poor people who get addicted to it.
Well, you might be right with heroin, but I don't think you're right with crack. After all, you can become addicted after 2 or 3 goes. You're addicted for life. There's no known cure.
Totally agree with you.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that there has to be another answer rather than the criminal one, don't you think?
Well, most government effort has been directed at controlling supply. What we've got to do is try and control demand, preventive education, alternative kicks, that kind of thing.
How do you feel about Richard's view that it should be just freely available, you know, for instance, a tobacconist?
There's a lot of very intelligent people who have that point of view, but I don't think we're going to see it in this country.
That was political, wasn't it? That was very political.
Yeah, had my training.
Yeah. Richard, I mean, has anything you've heard tonight on the show changed your mind at all, or not?
Oh, not in the slightest, no.
No?
I've not really had an opportunity to go through it all, but incidentally, I must... Although Chris also is very intelligent and speaks awfully well on this subject, it is amazing how much misinformation there is on this subject.
Yes,
I honestly, if I may just with respect say, this notion that crack is instantaneously addictive and incurable is maybe true, but seems to be improbable, and it's really far
What do you mean it may be true, but seems improbable?
I simply don't believe it, to be frank. But I mean, the fact is, it's such a new substance. We honestly don't know that much about it yet.
But in America, they've had it for a number of years now. They have terrific problems in America with crack.
Yeah, it's a different, exactly. It's a different social context entirely, and I do not believe we'll ever get that way here.
You don't think that what will happen in America necessarily will happen over here?
Certainly not. One thing we know is the effect of drugs depends entirely upon
Yeah.
the social context. And
I wonder if anybody in the audience has tried crack or would admit to it. Has anybody tried that here? No. I mean, would any of you, because, you know, you're some of you are students, some of you are sort of probably offered all kinds of things. Would any of you actually take it if you were offered just to try it?
No.
You wouldn't?
No.
That's heartening. That's heartening. Did you wanted to say something to me then? I thought you wanted to say something to me. I got the feeling...
You did. No,
I
you
did.
were right. Yes, I did want to say something. I mean, I work with the police, as you know, and I see these people quite frequently. But they are an example of a wider problem in society, and that the police say to me that they deal generally with about a single 5% of the population.
Yeah.
And that's why they're offering this argument to get away from the criminal idea of it, but that should apply to other elements of their work too.
In what way?
Because they're getting nowhere. It's a round circle thing that goes on and on and on with the same people. There's no efforts made to counsel and try and get some of these poor people out of that rut that they're in.
Do you think, and let me come to all three of you in turn here, do you think that if, for instance, cannabis, which is the one thing that most of these ladies and gentlemen do leave him alone, have come in here and think we're talking about? I mean, it's a terrifically wider issue than just cannabis. Do you think that cannabis should be legalised or decriminalised?
There is nothing more harmful in cannabis than there is in a cigarette. I mean, it might reduce your potency a bit, and it may cause cancer as well, but really, cigarettes are just as big a problem, so you can pay your money and take your choice as far as I'm
concerned. Now, I know what Richard
will
will say on this, so I won't bother, but Chris, what about you?
Well, I was in university in the 60s.
Did you try it?
Well, I wouldn't admit to it if I had.
Come on, Chris.
No, I wouldn't. I'm enough of a politician to say that. But I think it would give the wrong message to people to legalise it at the moment.
Hey! Thank you. What?
Yes, I did try it once. My brother was...
you did?
Only once. I tried it one day because my brother was living in some commune somewhere. I went to see him, I smoked it to the end of a carrot and felt sick.
Thanks very much indeed. Thank you to everybody for a moment. Now listen, just for one moment, one word. We've got something to show you at the end. I want you to think about it. What I don't want you to do is think about trying drugs, okay? A lot of people here have tried it. A lot of people out there have tried it. It will muck you up if you try it, all right? Drugs can kill, although Richard will say there's no real evidence. They can. They will get certain people addicted to them. And you can see the problems of alcohol and tobacco in society now. So just do yourselves a favour and remember that drugs will really muck your life up. So if you can, leave it alone. Good night, have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.